Next, allegations of CIA drug trafficking. Monday, the House Select Committee on Intelligence heard testimony concerning a report alleging the agency's involvement in trafficking cocaine to the Los Angeles area.
Really explosive this issue is in a community that has been racked by cocaine abuse, and I want to state to her and to all of you how seriously I take this issue. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that at the root of all this is one word: trust. A democratic society simply cannot function if the people believe that government agencies and officials participate in or condone illegal activities. And restoring trust will not be easy, but it is nonetheless an essential exercise for this committee. Speaking for one member, we cannot shirk from that responsibility, nor do I feel we will.
Of the Central Intelligence Agency's involvement in drug trafficking in South Central Los Angeles. Of the Central Intelligence Agency's involvement in the introduction, financing, and distribution of crack cocaine in the 1980s. I also wrote to the mayors of major urban cities, many of whom responded by confirming that their cities witnessed a significant increase in drug trafficking and proliferation of cocaine use and abuse during the same time period.
CIA's knowledge of drug trafficking related to the Contras defies the evidence and the logic that the CIA should have known. From the days of the CIA's first response to the allegations raised in the Dark Alliance series, many skeptics believed that the CIA could never produce a credible or truthful review of wrongdoings by its own agency. These skeptics could point, if they'd like, to this Sunday's Los Angeles Times to confirm their fears. The Times reported, in another case, that after 37 years, the CIA finally admitted publicly the most profound deception imaginable on an American family. Thomas Pete Ray and his top secret squadron of National Guard bombers were shot down during a CIA bombing mission in the Bay of Pigs debacle. For 37 years, the CIA denied that Mr. Ray and his squadron even existed, much less were shot down by Cuban troops in 1961. Only this month, faced with a document obtained by Freedom of Information Act request by the National Security Archives, did the CIA finally admit the truth 37 years later. My deep concern about the allegations raised in the Dark Alliance series that my government could have in any way been involved in or had knowledge of drug trafficking has caused me to spend much of my own time and resources to find out more about these allegations. After reading the Dark Alliance series, I interviewed Gary Webb, the writer of the series. And by the way, Mr. Chairman and members, Mr. Gary Webb is here today. He's sitting right here in this seat, and I invited him to come. He's put a lot of time and work into this investigation, and I have been working with him since the first day that I read it, and I think that he should be privy to all information as he continues his work in this area. First met with and interviewed Mr. Alan Finster, who was the attorney for Ricky Ross. Then I drove to San Diego to the Metropolitan Detention Center, where I interviewed Mr. Ricky Ross, the young man who was trafficking in drugs in South Central Los Angeles that were being sold to him by Mr. Norman Meneses and Mr. Danilo Blandone. He was being held in the Metropolitan Detention Center facility on drug charges. I also then drove to a restaurant in the Valley where I met with Mr. Celerino Castillo, the DEA agent who had investigated the drug trafficking operation at Ilopango Airfield in El Salvador. Castillo had documented that the CIA directed this drug trafficking operation out of 2 hangars using Contra Supply Network as a route for shipping drugs into the United States. I then interviewed former LAPD officer Mike Rupert, who states he was forced to leave the LAPD after he uncovered a connection between the CIA and narcotic trafficking operations in California and Louisiana. Mr. Rupert also was interviewed by the CIA for its report. I met and had numerous telephone conversations with Mr. Jerry Gazzetta, a detective with the City of Bell and a key member of the multi-agency task force working with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department investigating the Blandone narcotics operation. Gazzetta was a level 1 informant whose information was the basis of the affidavit of LA Sheriff Tom Gorton that resulted in the October 1986 raid of the Blandone operation's 14 sites in Southern California. I visited the records division of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and uncovered the sheriff's reports regarding the October 1986 drug bust. I was the first to obtain the copies of the documentation regarding the raids. They had said prior to that time that they did not exist, they could not be found, and I literally went in and by accident was able to access these documents, and they quickly tried to retrieve them from me, and of course I refused to leave until I had copies of what should have been public documents. On January 3rd, 1997, using my own personal funds, I flew to Nicaragua to meet with Enrique Miranda Jaime, a former Sandinista official and drug partner of Norman Meneses, a central figure in the allegations in the Dark Alliance series. I was contacted by someone who had information about the Colombian cartels and their connection to Norman Meneses. When I arrived in Nicaragua, I was taken to the prison in the town of Grenada by State Department representatives where I met with Miranda himself. Mr. Miranda told me some of the information that he gave to the CIA in this investigation, which is reported on pages 54 and 55 of the IG's report. Mr. Miranda currently is in prison after being convicted for smuggling 764 kilos of cocaine with his partner Norman Meneses. Meneses told Miranda in detail that Meneses worked for the Contras and that his drug trafficking operation had the support of the CIA. Meneses also told Miranda that he was receiving support directly from Oliver North and passing on the funds to support Contra groups. I met with Mr. Thomas Borge, a former Sandinista interior minister and head of intelligence. Mr. Borge came to meet with me from Nicaragua to South Central Los Angeles and waited for hours until I completed a day-long schedule, and I then spent some 4 hours with him. I have also had numerous telephone conversations with Corel Talavera Baca, the girlfriend of Rafael Cornejo, who was a relative and part of Norman Meneses' drug trafficking organization associated with the Contras, or were either CIA agents or CIA assets. Now, I'm going to name these individuals, and I'm going to say to you, Mr. Chairman and members, that even though the report cleverly refers to agents, we should be talking about agents and/or assets. I am going to say to you today in no uncertain terms, Mr. Adolfo Calero was a CIA asset. And he didn't just start with Norman Meneses. He started working with the American Embassy as a CIA asset, and many of the funds for aid were funneled through him. Mr. Enrique Bermudez was a CIA asset. Mr. Marcos Aguado, a Contra pilot and accused drug dealer. Mr. Francisco Avilas, a Contra official in Costa Rica. In the Frogman case, Mr. Ivan Gomez, CIA agent who accepted drug money from Mr. Meneses. Mr. Dagoberto Nunes, who ran a shrimp company for the Oliver North in Costa Rica. Rene Corvo, a Cuban-American who worked with the Contras in Costa Rica. Mr. Francisco Shanz, owner of the shrimp company for Oliver North in Costa Rica. Mr. Edmundo Meneses, American-trained Nicaraguan general and Norman Meneses' brother. Mr. Sebastian Gonzalez, Contra leader in Costa Rica and drug partner of Meneses. I assert here today that these are all CIA assets, and I would challenge this committee to ask the Inspector General and others, perhaps in the CIA, to document for you whether or not my allegations are true. They should give you sworn testimony as to whether or not they have knowledge about the people that I'm submitting to you being assets of the CIA. Today, I'm asking this committee to obtain the written response from the CIA that either categorically confirms or denies they are or were CIA assets or agents. Dwayne Claridge, Joseph Fernandez, and Claire George. All of these senior CIA officials had major responsibilities for the CIA's Contra operation. There can be no thorough investigation without sworn testimony from each of these individuals. They should be subpoenaed. Jose Fernandez was the former CIA station chief in Costa Rica while the Meneses drug organization was operating from there. Dwayne Dewey Claridge was the CIA officer who helped create the Contras at a time when the Meneses ring first began dealing cocaine for the FDN. His name also appeared in Oliver North's notebooks as being responsible for making quid pro quo deals with known drug king Manuel Noriega. Claridge summed up how serious he thought that this investigation was when he told reporters in December 1997 that the CIA, quote, sent me questions that were bullshit, and I wrote back, they were a bunch of bullshit. When I spoke with journalists following the release of the report this past January, much to my surprise, they had to admit to me they had not even read the entire report. They admitted they had only read the glossy 8-page summary, which offered up unsubstantiated conclusions of the CIA's innocent and arms trafficking. The CIA Inspector General report summarizes some of the Kerry Commission's 1,166-page reports, devastating findings on page 35 through 38. These are some of the admissions. Drug traffickers use the Contra war and their ties to the Contra as cover for their criminal enterprises in Honduras and Costa Rica. Assistance from the drug lords was crucial to the Contras. And the traffickers, in turn, promoted and protected their operations by associating with the Contra movement. Drug traffickers provided support to the Contras and used the supply network of the Contras. Contras knowingly received both financial and material assistance from the drug traffickers. In each case, one or another U.S. government agency had information regarding these matters either while they were occurring or immediately thereafter. Members of the Contra movement were involved in drug trafficking, including pilots who flew supplies for the Contras, mercenaries who worked for the Contras, and Contra supporters throughout Central America. Drug traffickers helped in the Contra supply operations through business relations with Contra groups. Drug traffickers contribute cash, weapons, planes, pilots, air supply services, and other materials to the Contras. U.S. Department funds authorized by Congress for humanitarian assistance was paid to drug traffickers. In some cases, these drug traffickers received the State Department's funds after having been indicted by federal law enforcement agencies on drug charges in other cases were the subject of pending investigations by those agencies. Despite widespread trafficking through the war zones of northern Costa Rica, the Kerry Committee was unable to find a single case which was made on the basis of a tip or a report by an official of a U.S. intelligence agency. This, despite an executive order requiring intelligence agencies to report drug trafficking to law enforcement officials, and despite direct testimony that drug trafficking on the southern front was reported to the CIA officials. U.S. officials involved with the Contras knew that drug traffickers were using the Contra infrastructure and that the Contras were receiving assistance from drug profits. Yet, they turned a blind eye and did not report these individuals to the appropriate law enforcement agencies. The reason I'm so interested in this, and the reason I'm so outraged by it, As a public elected officials, all of us must be concerned that our government could have anyway been involved in drug trafficking. Drug trafficking. That's a very, very serious offense against the people of this nation. We cannot afford to have our government, I don't care under what pretense, a covert operation or any kind of operation, involved in drug trafficking. Why do I do all of this? Because I want to find some CIA operatives, assets, or agents and somehow convict them? That's not going to happen. The least we could do is develop public policy that will indicate that drug trafficking can never be used in any covert operation, no matter what is being attempted. We cannot continue to put our heads in the sand. It's a shame what happened with the Kerry report. The idea that members of the Congress of the United States on the Senate side could have presented us with so much documentation, and then years later we have the investigation that was done by the San Jose Mercury, and we find more information about drug trafficking, and either the CIA absolutely knowing or turning its head, and we still can't come up with public policy. At the same time, we're spending millions of dollars talking about a war on drugs. Give me a break, Mr. Chairman and members. We can do better than this. I will not go away, members. I cannot go away. My community has been devastated, as many communities across this nation. As a result,
I will be coming back
Hi.
over. I'll continue.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I work South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, emphatically and
Can
without
you speak
equivocation.
further into the mic, sir? These mics don't seem to be...
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
Will you please take your seats? I will come back to you as we roll back across to the center section.
Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. I have been trying to get this out for 18 years, and I have the evidence. My question for you is very specific, sir. If in the course of the IG's investigations and Fred Hitz's work, you come across evidence of severely criminal activity,
Let him speak into
and
the
it's
mic.
classified, will you use that classification to hide the criminal activity, or will you tell the American people the truth?
All right, you want to hear the response first from Congressman Julian?
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department,
Please. I'm sorry, others want to hear this answer. I am sorry, others want to hear this answer.
It is your choice, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Inspector General, or office of one of your Congress persons from this.
I did that 18 years ago, sir, and I got shot at for it.
Wait a minute, sir.
If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
All right, Congressman Dixon.
Thank you, sir, for coming.
Wait a minute here.
Sir, I want to thank you for coming. You were at the last meeting. The staff probably had the spelling of your name wrong, but we would like to talk to you. We have been looking for a couple of days for you, and we want to make sure that you contact the committee, because obviously you have some valuable information. If you want to give it to me privately, if you want to hand it to that aide where I can contact you this evening, please do it. Don't let us get away without getting a contact for you.
Thank you, sir.
Pass it up to him now so everyone can see that I got it. That would be fine.
Thank you, sir. And for the record, my...
Please keep the noise down so that we can hear.
My name is Mike Ruppert, R-U-P-P-E-R-T. I did bring this information out 18 years ago, and I got shot at and forced out of LAPD because of it. I've been on the record for 18 years nonstop, and I'll be happy to give you, Congressman, anything that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Ruppert.
My name is James Otis. I'm currently making a documentary on the CIA, and we're interviewing 7 former agents. One was sent down to murder the head of Cuba, Fidel Castro. Another gentleman, Colonel Philip Renninger, was sent down to Guatemala to overthrow the government of Guatemala in 1954. The third agent was actually a spy on Iowa State University campus, where he spied on students, dark-skinned students, foreigners, and people from other countries. He was then sent down to Cuba to poison the food supply in Havana, poison the children of Cuba for whatever reason. So we all, I believe, already know this information, Mr. Deutsch. My question to you is, if we know all of this stuff that the agency has done historically, then why certainly should we believe you today when you say, certainly this could never happen in Los Angeles when it's happened all over the world?
Mr. Deutsch.
I understand that I did not come here thinking that everybody here was going to believe me.
That you can prove to us that you intend to get to the bottom of these allegations. And that is, the CIA in '81 was overrided under the Reagan administration. When President Ronald Reagan signed Executive Order 12333, he set up a parallel government headed by George Bush, for which Ali North also worked. And they privatized U.S. intelligence. For example, the gentleman that he brought up, Weakley, not Alexander, but Weakley, Scott Weakley, who was said by the government to not be involved with the government, it turns out he was involved in a private operation as part of what's called the Bush asteroids. But you have a private network run by George Bush and Ali North, not the CIA. You won't find the records in the CIA. They're not there. They're in these privatized intelligence agencies. Will you pursue that? Will you pursue Ali North and George Bush and the massive documentation? All these gentlemen, like this gentleman here, the co-defendant of Ricky Ross. Ricky Ross is doing George Bush's time.
Inspector General, to investigate any allegation in this matter that is brought forward. If you bring forward an allegation to me, I will see that it's investigated.
I have it right here, sir.
Give it to the staff members.
We are keenly aware that this entire episode has fueled suspicions some people have about the advent of the scourge of crack cocaine in the United States. Any suggestion of government complicity in that terrible outcome is one that must be seriously considered and answered. It is our obligation as the committee charged with the responsibility of overseeing the CIA to address these concerns, to examine the facts as exhaustively as possible. It will be extremely difficult to come up with an absolute answer that will remove all doubt. Such is the nature of these cases. That said, I believe the American people have a right to expect us to do a conscientious job in understanding the facts and in offering conclusions from this committee about the charges that have been made.